airstrikes, and who better to do it with than Representative Tom Malinowski, the Democratic New Jersey congressman, sits on the House Foreign Affairs Committee. Before that, he was Barack Obama's Assistant Secretary of State for Democracy, Human Rights and Labor, and before that, Washington Director for Human Rights Watch. Congressman, welcome to the show. You revealed earlier today that you tested positive for COVID. How are you feeling? And thank you for still joining us on the show tonight.
I'm feeling fine. Mild sore throat. I'm fully vaccinated and boosted. And I hope everybody is out there, because that's the way to keep this mild.
Well, that's good to hear, and we hope you fully recover very quickly. Let's talk about the big news today. What is your reaction to the news of this raid in Syria, the killing of this ISIS leader? How concerned are you about the civilian casualties? And that, too, in a kind of unofficial war that Congress has never authorized or approved.
Well, I may take a little issue with you here on this one. Most members of Congress support this administration or any administration going after ISIS, we do want to make sure that the war, military action against this group and terrorists who threaten the United States is put on a more stable and solid legal footing. Most of us are not comfortable that the post 9/11 authorizations have been extended almost indefinitely, but that doesn't mean that we would not authorize this kind of action. ISIS committed genocide in Syria, in Iraq. It is still a threat to civilians, to human beings across that region, in Afghanistan, and ultimately to the United States as well. There are not too many members of Congress who are mourning the death of the ISIS leader today.
I don't think anyone would disagree on the description of ISIS as genocidal, reprehensible, murderous, a threat, etc. I think the issue is, as we've covered on this show with Azmat Khan from the New York Times and others, the US has killed a lot of civilians in Syria and Iraq too while fighting ISIS. We can agree on that.
Yes, absolutely, and I think in this case what we had was a raid. I mean, we could have just dropped a giant bomb on this compound, and instead it appears, and we'll get more information about this, but it appears that, as in the Osama bin Laden case, the administration actually decided to put the lives of American service members at risk to try to apprehend, rather than simply, again, dropping a bomb with all of the risk of civilian casualties that entailed. Again, we as members of Congress, we conduct oversight, we ask questions, more details will emerge about this, but I have not seen anything to this point that would concern me.
Let's talk about the crisis on the Ukraine border. You've talked about Tucker Carlson encouraging pro-Russian talking points. And yesterday, after Republican Senator Josh Hawley urged the U.S. to take NATO membership for Ukraine off the table, White House Press Secretary Jen Psaki said this.
If you are just digesting Russian misinformation and parroting Russian talking points, you are not aligned with long-standing bipartisan American values. That applies to Senator Hawley, but it also applies to others who may be parroting the talking points of Russian propagandist leaders.
Look, Carlson and Hawley are reprehensible figures. But, Congressman, isn't it dangerous, McCarthyite even, to suggest anyone who's opposed to war with Russia or takes a more conciliatory line is a Putin stooge or parroting Russian talking points? That's not helpful, is it?
No, but it's also not helpful to characterize the position of the administration or folks like me who do want to support Ukraine as wanting war with Russia. I mean, you see that that's wrong, right? It's Russia that is threatening war against Ukraine. It's Russia that has massed tanks and artillery around Ukraine's borders and is threatening to go in, and we're not threatening war in response, right?
But two wrongs don't make a right, Congressman. You'd accept that?
What's that?
I agree. Some people may misrepresent your position, but it's wrong to misrepresent others in return, right?
I agree, and I'm not going to accuse somebody of being a Russian stooge or spy. I mean, if they're saying the same thing that Russia's saying, then it's fair to say you're agreeing with the Russian position. I'm not going to accuse them of disloyalty. Every American has a right to their point of view here. And I do think, and this is a serious debate, right? Is this because of NATO enlargement? Is this because NATO expanded to Eastern Europe in the 1990s? And I feel strongly that that is not actually what Putin is really concerned about. The last move that NATO made to bring in Ukraine was in 2008. Russia didn't do anything. In fact, our relationship with Russia got better. There was a reset under President Obama. What precipitated the Russian invasion of Ukraine in 2014 was not NATO. It was the fact that there was a revolution in Ukraine to overthrow a corrupt, authoritarian, pro-Putin government and a desire to get closer to the European Union. That's what Putin wanted to stamp out. So,
and
that's just an argument. I'm not saying you're pro-Russian.
That's a very fair and legitimate debate, and we've had it on this show, and I appreciate you making that point. I think it's just the kind of the labeling of people with different positions in this kind of. I remember the Iraq War, as I'm sure you do as well, and we shouldn't get into that kind of. Oh, you support dictators if you don't take a position that we don't like. Anyways, we're running out of time. I know you want to talk Yemen. You wrote to President Biden last month asking the administration to end an agreement with the Saudis in which the U.S. maintained Saudi warplanes. You cite the untold suffering those planes are inflicting in Yemen. Biden pledged last year to end support for offensive operations. How disappointed are you with Joe Biden on Yemen and Saudi Arabia?
So the Biden administration stopped providing the Saudi Air Force with the bombs that they were dropping on civilians in Yemen, but it quietly decided to keep on maintaining the aircraft. Each aircraft comes with a maintenance contract that's approved by the U.S. government. Without that maintenance on the ground, it can't fly. So I think that's inconsistent. If we're going to stop offensive support, we've got to stop what happens to be maybe the least sexy but most important offensive support that we're providing. And so we actually passed that in the House a couple of times, bipartisan, and we're urging the Biden administration to actually do it now.
I hope they're listening to you, Congressman. One last quick question. We're out of time, but I have to ask on the subject of name calling. Do you disagree with those of your congressional colleagues who call your former colleagues at Human Rights Watch and Amnesty anti-Semites simply for writing reports about apartheid in the occupied territories?
I'd like us to agree and disagree based on the substance. I don't agree with those who call this apartheid. At the same time, human rights groups have a right and duty to criticize all governments, to point out what they see as human rights violations. I don't think it's helpful to use that terminology. I don't think it's accurate, but we can have that argument on substance.
We can agree on that. Congressman Tom Malinowski, thank you so much for your time. Get better soon.